Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Namaskar. Welcome to the Chicago Bari satsang. I like to introduce Bhaktin Sweta, who is a professional pharmacist born and raised in Canada. She is actively practicing Bhakti Yoga or Krishna consciousness for the past 2 years. And her husband, Ashwin Mohan, who is a professional engineer born in India, has lived in the United States during his teenage years and moved to Canada. He has taken Diksha in the Brahma Madhava Gaudiya tradition in 2017 under ISKCON. His Sanskrit name is Anuttama Dasa, practicing Krishna consciousness for the past 6 years. Both Ashwin and his wife lives in Calgary and lead a devotional lifestyle as a result of soul searching and looking for meaning of life. Over to Bhaktin Swetaji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Namaskar. Thank you so much. It's lovely having us on this program, and I really thank you for that. It's nice seeing all of you today. So, we will start today's program by reciting a bhajan called Jaya Radha Madhava by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So, this is a very important bhajan or kirtan to glorify Lord Krishna in his most amorous pastimes in Vrindavana. I'll start by reading the translation, and then we'll sing this song with accompaniment of kartals, which are hand cymbals, and Anuttama will play the mridanga, which is a traditional drum. So the translation of the song is Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavana. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Raja, the holder of the great hill named Govardhana, the beloved son of Mother Yashoda, and the delighter of the inhabitants of Raja. He wanders in the forest along the banks of the river Yamuna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to Chicago Bari for um, hosting us. So today we'll be speaking on the Bhagavad Gita, uh, a couple of verses, prior to which we will chant some mantras in honor of our previous teachers, we whom we call acharyas, gurus. So we will observe that, and I will go. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the translation of the mantra is that
Ashwin, if you don't mind, can you increase your volume, please?
sure.
The-
So the first mantra is the meaning of that is I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I therefore offer my obeisances unto him. The second mantra is I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Krishna for having taken shelter of his lotus feet. Our obeisances are unto you, O Master, servant of Saraswati Goswami. You are kindly spreading the message of Lord Chaitanya in the Western countries, which are full of voidism and personalism. The third mantra is I offer my respectful obeisances unto Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, unto Lord Nityananda, Sri Advaita, Sri Vas, Gadadhar Pandit, and all others in the line of devotion. And the last one is known as the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which combines just three words, Hare Krishna and Rama. Hare meaning that which attributes to the feminine aspect of the divine, Krishna meaning all attractive, and Rama meaning the source of all pleasure. So we'll be reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is. It is a book that has been published, written by Srila Prabhupada, and reflects the commentaries of the previous teachers in the Brahma Madhava Gaudiya tradition. And I will be reading from chapter 2, verse 62 and 63. However, prior to reading the Bhagavad Gita, it's really important that when we open such a sacred text, that we are aware of its importance and its significance, as well as recognizing the reason why it was spoken. So here we have Lord Krishna speaking the sacred wisdom to Arjuna, and Lord Krishna is accepted as the foremost authority by various different teachers, such as Sri Ramanujacharya, Sri Madhvacharya, Shankaracharya, and so on. And he's speaking this divine message, the song of the divine, to Arjuna, who's his very dear friend. So, therefore, in order to understand the secrets and the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, it's really important that we come into the position of being an Arjuna on the battlefield, trying to submissively listen to the message and understanding the message as it is. So, I will begin our topic today, which is dealing with why are there miseries in the world and the source of all miseries, which Lord Krishna has nicely summarized in just two verses. So we will be going to chapter 2, text 62, which is Dhyayato Vishayam Pumsaha Sangaste Jupajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha Kamata Krodho Vijayate Krodha Bhavati Sammoha Sammo Smriti Vibramaha Smriti Brahmashada Buddhi Nasho Buddhi Nasha Pranashyati. So that was 62 and 63. And Shweta, would you like to read the translation?
Sure. The translations are by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the first translation is, while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. The second translation is, from anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool.
Read the purports.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll also be reading the purports. So the first purport is, one who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagements, and if they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. In the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of the other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of sense objects, and the one method to get out of this puzzle of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal, and as a result, Kartikeya was born. When Haridasa Thakura was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi, but Haridasa easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. As illustrated in the above mentioned verse of Sri Yamunacharya, a sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. That is the secret of success. One who is not, therefore, in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is surely ultimately to fail, for the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. The next purport is, Srila Rupa Goswami has given us this direction. Prapanichikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vastunaha mumukshubhi parityago vairagyam falgukatyate. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.58. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects, and as a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain to the perfect stage of renunciation. Their so-called renunciation is called falgu, or less important. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. Therefore, he does not become a victim of material consciousness. For example, for an impersonalist, the Lord, or the Absolute, being impersonal, cannot eat, whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid good eatables. A devotee knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and that he eats all that is offered to him in devotion. So, after offering good eatables to the Lord, the devotee takes the remnants, called prasadam. Thus, everything becomes spiritualized, and there is no danger of downfall. The devotee takes prasadam in Krishna consciousness, whereas the non devotee rejects it as material. The impersonalist, therefore, cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation, and for this reason, a slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into the pool of material existence. It is said that such a soul, even though rising up to the point of liberation, falls down again due to not having support in devotional service.
Thank you for reading that. So we will just go through the translations of the two verses again. So the translation of verse 62, while contemplating the objects of the senses. So this is when the objects of the senses, so we have five senses, and whatever we perceive, whatever's good to see or good to touch or good to smell, we contemplate on that. A person develops attachment for them. So naturally, if we see something that's nice, we may develop a certain type of attachment for that. And then from that attachment, lust develops. And from that lust, anger arises. So basically, when it says lust, it also means material desires, selfish desires. So basically, when we are not able to get that object for our gratification, our sense gratification, we become angry why we didn't get it. So the next verse goes on, from anger, complete delusion arises. And this is something that we can often experience, that when we are angry, our faculty to make decisions is very poor. And therefore, here it says, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. So when we are in a delusional state, we oftentimes can't remember and use our intellectual faculties. So then it goes on to say, when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And then when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So in a hierarchy, we understand that there's certain type of sense objects around us. So the senses, the five senses, the ability to see, the ability to hear, the ability to smell, the ability to taste and touch. So that's higher than the sense objects, because those are like sensors for our body. Then above the senses is the mind. So the mind really perceives what these senses are, what sense objects are, and what the feeling is like. And the mind tends to be very flickery, going towards attaching itself to all these different types of sensory experiences. And above the mind is the intelligence. So the buddhi, or the intelligence, can dictate the mind and control the mind. And then above the intelligence is the individual soul, also known as jivatma. So we have this hierarchy of the sense object, the senses, the mind, the intelligence, and the jivatma. It's given in the Bhagavad Gita. So here we can understand that when we contemplate on sense objects, really that's when the downhill takes place, where we lose our intelligence and we fall back into materialism. And we oftentimes see this in society, where when bad things happen, it's often due to these two verses only. So just going over the purport a little bit. So it says that those who are not in this consciousness of awareness and having a connection or relationship with the divine, Krishna, then we're subjected to material desires because we're contemplating on objects of the senses. So either we're spiritualists or we're materialists, and there's oftentimes many people get sucked into the material pool because of the weapons of mass distraction, which is in the form of advertising, commercials, commercial consumerism, and so forth. And this kind of sucks us down and distracts us from the real point of human life. And we have to really consider that our human form of life is actually very rare. It's actually in these dark times we may see that it can be very bleak, and our ability to enjoy is a lot less. But we have to also go inward and not outward by diving deep into spirituality, reading spiritual texts, keeping in touch with people who are interested in spiritual discussions like satsangs, and definitely going to the temple when it's open and safe. Um, these are all activities that will help propel our spiritual consciousness, and it will keep us away from the material objects that we can surround ourselves with. So it's really important to have some sort of engagement, and we can engage ourselves. For example, a simple thing is we have to eat every day. So a simple process to check the tongue is to make sure that one prepares a nice sattvic diet, which is conducive to a spiritual realization. One may offer that in front of the Lord with a tulsi leaf, and in this way, ring a bell and chanting mantras. One offers gratitude as well as devotion unto the Lord, who says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya pranashriti. So, tadaham bhakti uparitam ashmani pradatmanaha. So, Lord Krishna says that Patram pushpam phalam toyam. So, patram is leaf, phalam is fruit, pushpam is flower, and toyam is water. So these are four objects that we can offer that are available to us readily. But on top of that, we can also, whatever food we cook, whatever we eat, whatever we do, we can do it as an offering. So similarly, this process of yajna, we can always do that on a daily basis. At least you can offer some water every day in your sacred space or altar. When whatever food is being cooked in the kitchen, you make sure it's done with a clean state of mind and consciousness, because the consciousness of the cook very much goes into the preparation. And in this way, when we are offering it, it gets free from karma, and be able to honor that as a prasadam. So that's just one way. Another way is when we're listening, we can often listen to different types of music, but we can also choose to listen to bhajans or kirtans that glorify the Lord. And in this way, we are able to purify our senses for our hearing, as well as reading texts like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. These texts are really there to um, uplift us in this age of Kali, which is very dark, because the age of Kali is where the spiritual potency is the least, as opposed to the previous yugas or ages like Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapar Yuga. So understanding the text here, going a little bit deeper, is also to understand that um, just by having this higher taste, uh, one can refrain themselves from these gross sense gratificatory activities. So when we have taste for prasadam, when we have taste for chanting, when we have taste for japa, when we have taste for reading the Bhagavad Gita, then automatically our our attraction for other objects just erodes away. So we have to invest practically a certain time of our day and make sure it's regular. If we don't have a regular practice, then the mind has the ability to just, just like a monkey, the monkey of the mind jumps from one branch to the other. we are bound to get diverted. Or the mind says, oh, why should I do that? Why should I read Bhagavad Gita today? Why should I do a spiritual activity today? So, in order to overcome the mind, we always have to feed the intelligence with this sacred wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita so that it nourishes the soul. The next verse talks about two types of vairagya. One is Falgu Vairagya and the other one's Yukta Vairagya. And oftentimes, Falgu Vairagya means I have a particular sense object and I consider it material, so I just renounce it. Yukta Vairagya means I have a particular object of this world, but I can engage it in the service of the Lord. So oftentimes we see the Falgu Vairagya saying that, okay, there's a popular theory that says that Brahmam Satyam Jagat Mithya. So coming from the Vaishnava tradition, we reject this theory because the world is very much real, but it's also temporary. So it's not false that we reject everything in this world. Yes, we do accept certain aspects of this world and we can use it in the service of the Lord, because Lord Krishna mentions in the third chapter that He has given us all these different items like grains, flowers, water in this earth, so that we can use it in yajna, so that we can have that real deep connection with the Lord. So now we see that Falgu Vairagya means, okay, I take a sense object, I say, okay, it's material, I reject it, and I have nothing to do with it. But however, due to the lack of a higher taste, we always come back and fall down. So it's really important to have a higher taste and use whatever. For example, prasadam, we don't reject food and say, okay, it's material, so I will have maybe 5 chickpeas today for dinner. We should be practical and say that the body needs nourishment, but we can use a certain prescription like a diet of sattvic foods that are ready to be offered, and when doing so it becomes a prasadam. Now one may wonder that all these ethics, devotional ethics, rules and regulations seem very restrictive. To give a practical example would be if you were to take the I-94 from Chicago and go towards Detroit, and you have two drivers. One driver who really doesn't want to follow any rules. He's going 120 miles an hour. He's cutting people off, not showing any, indication, and when he changes lanes, and he gets to the appointed destination, but the police gets a hold of him, gets impounded, he gets his license suspended, and he's not able to drive anymore because he lost his car, he doesn't have his license is suspended. Another driver drives on the same road but follows the rules, drives within the speed limit, exits at the right time and not cutting drivers off, arrives at the destination, has his license intact, has his car intact. So from this, we can learn that one person who disregards the rules that's been made, the laws, they may be free, but they come to a point where they're no longer free. Whereas the one who actually follows and lives within one's means actually attains that freedom because they're free to drive, they're free to have their vehicle. Similarly, the Gita and the Bhagavatam really talks about having a very living a life that is very much conscious of not the material plane, but more spiritual consciousness. We are aware of Krishna, and therefore we've called it as Krishna consciousness. So by following these devotional ethics, one can really um, experience true freedom. And the freedom is freedom from the senses from the sense objects. The our we may think we are free, but eventually we're actually just being slaves to the senses. And that is not at all conducive to spiritual realization. We should be servants of the supreme, servants of the divine, but not the servants of the senses, because we become a slave to the senses, and that doesn't yield us true happiness. So oftentimes we see people caught up in this negativity of the world, and just bringing some worldly examples. We're going through COVID-19 pandemic throughout the world, and it originated from a wet meat market. Why? Because some people have, the dhyato vishayam pumsaha, which is, the person's being attracted to certain sense objects, the senses being attracted to sense objects. So they're attracted to eating a certain kind of exotic meat, and animals are kept in unhygienic, dirty conditions. And then, what happens? The virus spreads, and all these viruses, they do come from animals. And meat eating is definitely, in Vedic culture, Krishna does not promote that. So, but we see it's going on throughout the world, and it causes a lot of problems, including climate change. Some other problems can include, well, two countries are fighting over land. So what's the reason for that? Well, again, dhyato vishayam pumsaha. Well, that type of land might have some resources that are very, very favorable towards developing business and exploration. So we exploit Mother Nature, known as Bhumi Devi, and we try and get something out of it, and we use it for an exploitative means, and problems just ensue. So any problem in this world can be related to being these two verses, including a certain personality who's still claiming to be president and not losing. Why is he doing that? Because he's attracted to the power of the presidency, and it brings a lot of prestige, it brings a lot of fame, it brings a lot of glory. But why? The origin of this is, again, dhyato vishayam pumsa. I'm attracted to these material things, and I can't get my mind off of it, and I develop strong attachment for it. And as a result, I become angry if it's being taken away from me. And we see this in various dictatorships that continue on and on. It's because they want to hold on to that. So we have also noticed that in India, as a result of this pandemic, many have all the factories have closed down. There's less and less vehicles on the road in places like Delhi, holy places like Vrindavan. One can notice that the air is a lot more clean, the skies are nice and blue, the rivers are much cleaner than before. And again, it's really nice when things are returned to its natural state. But many people suffer from different ailments as a result of pollution. Animals are definitely suffering as a result of that. And we can see that as a result of reduction of human activity, which is propelled by this consumerism, which again comes back to dhyato vishayam pumsaha. So the way we can mitigate these problems is definitely by living a life where we keep the body and soul together, but at the same time recognize that ultimately our purpose is to live a very spiritual life and live a life very much of simple living and high thinking. So these are some methods where we recognize that, okay, well, we have to discriminate what is our wants from our needs. And when we do that exercise, we can live a life of simplicity, focusing on the Lord. We can focus on spiritual activities, spiritual sanghas. A simple activity is, one can chant japa. We are working professionals, but at the same time, we don't ignore our spiritual selves or spiritual bodies. So hence we engage in spiritual activities. So doing activities like meditation. So we focus on japa meditation, on the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. We find time for it, an hour and a half every day. We do a little bit of deity worship. We go to the temple on the weekends. We tune into different classes. We engage in teaching and teaching others about the science of the Gita. So we read a lot. So these are some ways where we keep ourselves, entertained and going in a different realm, as opposed to the mundane scope of life or the outlook of life, where you go through your Monday to Friday, you're working, and it's all about paying bills and dying. So it doesn't seem like a hopeless situation. But when you have a higher purpose, you automatically engage in it and you feel there's some inner goodness that comes from within. And when this inner goodness radiates, finding time for it is very, very, very simple, and it becomes easier and easier because Lord Krishna mentions that as we surrender, he rewards unto us. So similarly, when we surrender more and more of our material attachments, the more and more blessing and mercy we can receive from the Lord. And to kind of close off, it's really important to have a daily regimen, even if it's for 10 minutes a day, that is a spiritual activity, ideally in the morning, that really helps us focus and grounds us. And in this way we can lead a day full of concentration and goodness, and the it's a gift of that keeps on giving. So spirituality is definitely one thing that's oftentimes ignored, but from here, the Bhagavad Gita, we can see that materialism doesn't really bring us the happiness that we really seek. The happiness that we seek is lying in spiritual happiness, because material happiness is that happiness
Temporary.
that is temporary and it'll never make us happy.
Mhm.
One may say, okay, I will give up all my materialism once I enjoy myself, and then I'll come to spirituality. But oftentimes, one materialism is very hard to give up, and one may think that, okay, well, I will become 66, 70 years old, and then I'll engage in spiritual activities. But the Maya material energy is so strong that it has the power to divert us from
And
the
it
real
takes
goal of
a
life.
lifelong practice.
And it takes a lifelong dedicated practice that keeps on giving in our lives, giving to us in so many different ways, that we can find peace, solace, and ultimately happiness. So thank you for joining us today. And we would like to thank Chicago Kali Bari for this wonderful opportunity. And yeah,
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. I like to thank Bhakti Sweta and Anuttama Dasa for a wonderful discourse today. And I did learn a lot today, and hope everybody enjoyed this speech. And thanks to Chicago Kalibari Temple for giving us this opportunity. Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.